And we are live. Welcome to Olivia's Stories, ladies and gentlemen. Story number 1. I've always heard that the walls have ears, but I'm only beginning to realize just how true that is. Keeping your marriage private and not sharing personal information with people is really underrated. I've come to understand that I've been a fool for a very long time, and now I've been served divorce papers. I talked trash about my husband with my best friend because he picked a fight with his boss and got fired from work. But now, a lot of things are falling apart in my marriage. Both of them ended up backstabbing me and betraying me without me even realizing it. I should have never trusted my best friend so much that I didn't think twice before telling her something so personal. I never intended to start talking trash about my husband, but the circumstances led me to do it. He lost his job, and we had to go through a lot. It was a lot of pent-up anger from everything that happened that led me to take my family problems to my best friend. I don't know where to start, guys, but as a woman, I'm sure that I'm not the only one who gossips with my best friend. Well, I'm definitely sure that I'll be the only one to regret it this much. My name is Josephina, and I'm a 27-year-old nurse. I've been married to my husband, Nathaniel, for the past 4 years now. My husband is just 1 year older than me, if you're wondering. He's 28 years old. My husband worked at a tech company, but he lost his job recently. He lost his job because he got into a big fight with his boss at work. Yes, guys, my husband lost his job because he let his anger get the best of him. It's not every day your husband suddenly comes back from work, barely 4 hours after leaving, and then he tells you that he lost his job. I almost had a heart attack when I heard him tell me that. It was very difficult to understand why that suddenly happened to my husband. I had a lot of questions to ask him that day, but I chose to keep quiet. I didn't want to burden him with questions because I assumed that he was also feeling bad for what happened to him. I decided to give him some time to get over it. I won't even lie. I was practically dying in silence because I had to suppress my urge to scream out loud. We have 2 children together, and I had to worry about them. I have a boy and a girl, and they are 4 years and 2 years old, respectively. I got pregnant before we got married. If you're wondering how we have a 4-year-old already, lol. After 2 days of giving him time to cool off, I sat my husband down and demanded answers. I asked him why he lost his job and what happened. He just told me that his company decided to shed their workers because they were going through financial problems and blah, blah, blah. He kept using all these big grammars about tech and whatnot. I'm a nurse, and I'm the perfect definition of a nerd. I do not have any knowledge about tech companies and how they function. So, I believed everything Nathaniel said to me. I mean, all I know how to do is care for patients and treat them when necessary. I have no idea about companies shedding workers because of fundings. Those were the lies Nathaniel told me, and I believed them all. I didn't care to investigate or ask questions. I can't be alone when I say it's highly unusual that a wife would sit down and guess her husband decided to pick up a fight with his boss at work. That's not a common occurrence, and my mind did not even go there at all. It was very difficult to keep up weeks after my husband lost his job. We had 2 kids to cater for, and my salary was barely enough to do anything. I earn almost the same amount of money my husband earns, but it became difficult to shoulder the responsibility myself. Before, we would split the responsibilities and use our salaries to cater for the family together. But it became very difficult to do that as time went on because I was doing everything alone. At first, we didn't really feel it because my husband and I had some savings together. But months or even weeks after that, the savings finished and were depending solely on my salary. It was difficult to maintain the apartment we lived in because of the high electricity and water bill. So guys, we had no choice than to move from our former apartment. I won't lie that it was not a difficult decision to make. To move from a good apartment to a lower one just because you couldn't afford it is not the best feeling in the world. But we had to make the decision because it was very difficult to spend that much money on an apartment when we were barely able to pay our legal fees. I got very frustrated that I had to go through that with my family. I don't know how to put it, but it is not exactly the most ideal situation in the world. It's harder to live a difficult life when you have had it a little bit easier before. When I found out my husband lost his job, it was a very big deal, and I felt very defeated because I knew that it was not going to be easy to keep up. But I always assured myself that it was just a temporary thing. I thought he would get another job in at most a month's time. I didn't think we would go 3 months with only me catering for the family. As time went on, I began to get very irritated. I started asking my husband why he was not searching for a job. I held out for a long time and did not want to bring up the discussion because I knew that his ego would be hurt. I have no choice then to finally speak up because the frustration was too much. My instincts were not wrong because the moment I brought the topic up, my husband practically flared. I am not even exaggerating, guys. Is the absolute truth, and that is why I got even angrier. Just like I predicted, his ego was very hurt. He accused me of trying to shame him in his toughest moments. Yes, my husband really said that to me. He victimized himself and made me out to be a bad person. Even though I know many people will be against me for saying this, I'll still say it because I am being honest here. I don't think it's fair that men get angry at their wives when the woman has a problem with them losing their job. I know some women are housewives and they don't really work. My situation was different because before and after I met my husband, I worked. I think it's not okay to get angry at your partner when they demand reasons for your unemployment. I know some of those men are not at fault and they are just victims of the circumstances. But I don't think it's unreasonable for a woman to have a problem with having her family suffer. It's just as simple as this. I would have never married you if I knew that I would have to change my children to a much lower school because we can't afford their school fees anymore. I had to do that with my 2 children, and it was a very hard decision to make. Nathaniel got very angry and he went as far as swearing at me. I get that he has a right to be angry about my approach. But I don't think there's any person on earth who will not have a problem with having their husband unemployed for that long. If you don't say it, you certainly think about it, and I was no different. I didn't even want to offend him at first. I just wanted to know why he wasn't searching for a job. Maybe he had been doing so secretly by then, but I never saw him going out to look for a job. Nathaniel was very angry when I brought up the topic, and he literally left the house immediately. I felt bad immediately because I thought that I had done something wrong. I waited for him to come back, but he didn't come home till it was very late in the evening. Even when Nathaniel came home, he didn't want to talk to me, so I took it upon myself to get to the bottom of everything. Before Nathaniel lost his job, we didn't really have any problems in our marriage. We have always been a respectful couple and respect each other a lot. Apart from the financial crisis that came with him using his job, there were also crises that started showing up in the marriage, so I decided to get to the bottom of it. I also noticed that Nathaniel did not like it any time I brought up his former company and how ruthless they were. I always tried bringing up conversation about what could have possibly made this company choose him instead of any other employee. Nathaniel always swept my conversations under the rock, and he never engaged me in any of them. Eventually, I really began to read into it, and I began to question why Nathaniel found it hard to talk about his former company. I know you guys are thinking that I'm a nosy woman who couldn't just mind my business. Well, I had no choice than to intervene because a lot had been going on, and I was tired of it. I needed answers, so I decided to speak to my mother about it and asked for her opinion. I didn't directly tell her Nathaniel lost his job because I'd kept it a secret from her. Nathaniel had warned me not to tell my parents because he didn't want to feel embarrassed or get any help from them. I understood his desire to keep his male ego, so I did not tell my parents about it. I just lied to my mother and said a friend of mine told me her husband lost his job and asked her advice. I also told her everything that I've been going on, but I did not personalize it. Thankfully, my mother did not read into any of it, and she did not understand that I was actually the one seeking advice indirectly. She just told me that it was best to find out if my friend's husband was the only one who had gotten sacked from his previous job, and then inquire about everything. I actually found our advice very helpful and realized that I had been a big fool for not making further inquiry. I instantly regretted just blindly taking my husband's word, and so I decided to find out the truth on my own. I didn't know any of his colleagues directly, but I knew someone who worked as a cleaner at his former workplace. I got to know her because she usually came to the clinic I work at for checkups. I decided to ask her if my husband was the only one that stopped coming to work. She just told me that she was not sure, but she knew that he was the only one whose desk had been empty for a long time. A part of me knew that there was no way it was only my husband that got sacked by the company if they wanted to shed employees. I knew that there had to be more to that story, but I just didn't know how to get the truth out of him. I was also aware that my husband would never tell me the truth himself. That's why I decided to use other means. I decided to go to my husband's old company myself and find out what had been going on. I know I sound crazy, and to be honest, I was really scared of doing that. I didn't know what to expect, and the possibility of things going wrong made me scared. I know I sound like I'm exaggerating, but just me, that's the truth. I also didn't want to make my husband angry in case he found out I went to his old company. Well, even though I was really worried and scared, I ended up going to the company because my curiosity was getting the best of me. I was also going through financial troubles, lol. I needed to find all the truth. When I went to the company and asked to see some of his colleagues, I was received very coldly, and not everybody really wanted to speak to me. That was weird because I did not get why they were being rude when I had never interacted with any of them physically before. The only person that really agreed to have a conversation with me was a lady who seemed to work in the same department as my husband. She just pulled me to the side and told me to follow her so we could have some coffee. I was really surprised, but my curiosity did not make me leave. I followed her to have the coffee, and that was when I found out the real truth. Yes, guys, I discovered that my husband had been lying to me for a very long time. The fact that I never even imagined the possibility of him lying is crazy. I didn't really expect to find out anything substantial when I went to the company. I just wanted to fix my curiosity and clear my doubts, but I ended up finding out that my husband got fired because he picked up a fight with boss at work. I was very embarrassed to hear that because I had never imagined my husband would do something like that. I kept thinking that it made no sense that he would risk our financial life and kids' future just because of a fight. What also made no sense was the fact that he decided to lie to me about it. That just explained the truth and proved my suspicions right. I decided to ask her what the fight had been about, but she consistently told me that she did not know. I thanked her and left the company after not being able to get more information out of her. I'll be very honest, guys, it was very difficult for me to just stay home and pretend like I didn't know the real truth and why my husband got fired from his job. It was hard for me to play dumb whenever he brought up the topic and assured me that he was looking for a job. I didn't want to tell him the truth that I had gone to his company because I knew that would have caused a fight between us. I just knew that he would never really accept the fact that I went behind his back and visited the same company that he claimed to have fired him. Weeks after that, Nathaniel was still unemployed, and it seriously got on my nerves. When I didn't know the truth, I was really patient with him, but knowing the truth did not make me patient at all. I blamed him for everything, and I believed that he was the reason everyone was suffering. I didn't see things from his perspective anymore, and I began to snap at him at every given chance. It was so constant that Nathaniel also noticed it, and he called me out on it. He accused me of treating him differently because of his financial troubles. I made it clear to him that that was not the reason, and that even though I was not happy with the fact that he was unemployed, what made me more upset was the discovery I'd made. I couldn't hold it in any longer, guys, and that's why I finally told him the truth. I tried to avoid it for a very long time, but it was hard to keep it to myself. Just like I expected, Nathaniel was very angry, and he didn't take it easy with me at all. It was a very heated argument, and the both of us said a lot of hurtful things to each other. I kept asking him why he chose to lie to me, and why he wasn't honest with me. Nathaniel also kept asking me why I decided to go behind his back and make the inquiry instead of trusting his words. It was just an argument filled with allocating blame and trying to make the other person the villain. Nothing good came out of the argument, so I decided to ask Nathaniel questions the next day. I asked him why he chose to lie to me and why he decided to pick a fight with his boss. He just told me that I would never truly understand his reasons and that he was not ready to tell me the truth yet. That was all he said to me before he left the house that day. According to him, he had to go and look for a job. What happened that day was the straw that broke the camel's back for me, and I knew that I could not handle bottling everything up any longer. I finally decided to go talk to my best friend about it because I thought she was a trustworthy person who would listen to me and honestly give out her opinion. A problem shared is a problem half solved, and that was the mentality I used to give myself courage to speak to my best friend about it. I just wanted to vent a little, but I never expected my venting spree to lead to another series of problems. I never imagined that my best friend would backstab me as much as she did, and that too with the help of my husband. And 3 months ago, I went to meet my best friend at her house. I told her that I urgently needed to speak to her, or else I'd run crazy. Reddit, I was very vulnerable, and that's the only reason I decided to run to my best friend for help. She didn't have a problem with me meeting up with her at all, and was very cool with me coming over. She even prepared lunch for me and made sure I was extremely comfortable. She asked me what had been on my mind and why I was suddenly desperate to talk to her. I just started venting and telling her how irresponsible my husband had been recently. I left no stone unturned, and I told her everything without leaving details out. If you all remember, I implied that I talked trash about my husband. That is true because I didn't paint him in a bad light at all. I just told my best friend how frustrated I'd been because Nathaniel was making life very difficult for me. My best friend's name is Flora, and she has been my best friend for 10 years. Well, now, I don't think I'm going to refer to Flora as my best friend anymore. She's no longer close to me, and I literally don't want to have anything to do with her. She listened to me rant for hours, and she tried her best to calm me down. She even joined in and talked trash about Nathaniel too. She told me my feelings were valid, and that I did nothing wrong. It felt good to hear that, and it also felt good to tell someone everything that I'd been going through. I was relieved to get the weight off my chest and felt a lot lighter. I was even grateful to Flora for giving me a listening ear and accommodating me in her home. Prior to Nathaniel losing his job and I went to speak to Flora, I'd never told her how much my husband earned as a tech guy. I'd never seen a reason to tell her that. But on that particular day, I got carried away and mentioned Nathaniel's salary somewhere in the conversation. It slipped off, and I didn't think it was a big deal because he no longer had his job. I got home that day feeling a little better that I'd spoken to Flora. I really liked the fact that she reassured me and told me that I did nothing wrong. Not once in our conversation did Flora ever advise me to get things to work with me and Nathaniel. I never saw that as a red flag, but I'm only beginning to realize that I should have noticed that something was off. I just blindly followed everything she said, because I was looking for someone to reaffirm me and tell me that I was doing like them. Now I honestly regret the fact that I kept everything from my parents and my real family. I should have never listened to my Nathaniel and kept the truth away from my parents. If my mother had known the truth, she would have given me honest advice. I am also to blame for taking my problems to Flora instead of doing the right thing. Listen to me, guys. No matter what happens, never take your personal issues to your best friend, no matter how close you think you both are. No one is ever truly going to have your back like you and your blood family. In case you are all wondering how Flora backstabbed me, I'll just tell you as clearly as possible. Flora went behind my back and had an affair with my husband. In other words, I am trying to say that Nathaniel and Flora had a secret relationship behind my back. I can't even stop my tears from falling right now because I am beyond embarrassed and disappointed in myself for trusting the wrong person. The person I called my best friend for 10 good years used my weakness against me and decided to hit on my husband just because we were having issues in our marriage. If that honestly doesn't scream disrespect, then I don't know what does. If not for a very good Samaritan, I would have never even found out in the first place, and I would have been left to believe lies. I found out in the most coincidental way possible, and it took me a lot not to lose my mind. It's not every day that you find out that your own best friend has been backstabbing you. Nathaniel cheated on me with Flora, and she is the one that made the move. I don't even care who made the move first. That man just played me. No matter what he says I did to him or how I made him feel uncomfortable, no woman would have shouldered the responsibility of the house for many months while he was unemployed, and the best way he could pay me back was cheat on me. Because I was not ready to take his unemployed state, he chose to pay me back by betraying me. I am not saying I am not wrong in this situation, or I do not have a hand in what happened, but wow. How could a man that has been tolerated and fed by his wife turn around and cheat on her because he could not take a few hard words? Even before I was told that Nathaniel and Flora were having an affair, I noticed a lot of changes in Nathaniel. He started coming home late and leaving early even though I knew that he was unemployed. I didn't notice at first because I was busy working at the clinic and didn't have lots of free time, but I started to get hints from the children. I would not like to mention my children's name because I want to keep the identity private. One day I got back from work, and my son told me he had been alone with his sister for some time and was very happy to see me. I asked him if his daddy was not at home, and he told me that Nathaniel had been living in the house frequently and told them that he was going out for work. I was very shocked because I always believed that Nathaniel had been home, and he never told me that they got a new job. I confronted him because I never wanted to try butter things up. Nathaniel just brushed it off and told me he had been job hunting. I didn't believe him, and I asked him why he had been job hunting for months. His lies were becoming predictable and hideous, and I was tired of trying to believe him. Nathaniel ignored all my rants. At some point, he stopped eating the food I cooked and stopped using my money. I would ask him why he was doing that, and he told me that he was not interested in spending any of my money. Sometimes he would even say that he hoped I could leave him alone and stop ranting because he was no longer interested in my money. There was even one day that he searched me down and told me that I had been very rude just because he lost his job. I tried making understand that I had been patient with him enough, and that it was only a matter of time before I eventually got frustrated. He just made an illustration that he would have never treated me that way if I was the one that lost my job. He told me that I barely earned any money and that his salary had been supporting the family for the past 4 years. Nathaniel said he earned way more than me when he had a job, and that I had no right to brook shame him. After saying all those things to me, he told me to stop providing for the house, and that he would now pay the bills and pay for the children's school fees. I asked him where he got the money from, and he told me that it was none of my business. He finished by saying he hoped I would drop his name and stop spreading rumors about him since he now took over the responsibilities from me. That really hit a spot, because I got very self-conscious and wondered how he knew that I had spoken to someone about him. I began to suspect something was up because I'd never insinuated that I spoke to anyone about what had been going on in my marriage. He even generalized it and accused me of spreading rumors about him to anyone that cared to listen. Yes, guys, he really said that. And that just goes to say that Flora had lied to him and said that I had been spreading lies about him. I tried to make Nathaniel expatiate on what he was saying, but he did not give me time to speak. Barely 1 week ago, we moved back into our old apartment. Nathaniel footed the bills and got us back into their apartment. Luckily, no one had moved in yet. I kept asking Nathaniel where he got the money from and how he was able to get us back to the old apartment, but he stopped talking to me completely and only spoke to me when it regarded the children. It was like I was not even married anymore, and I was just leaving with a friend who did not even speak to me. All my efforts to start a conversation and get us to talk were all in vain. I even asked him once if he had seen a job, but he brushed it off and told me it was none of my business again. I know you are thinking that it was not a big deal, and that I had gotten all I wanted and he had a job. But if he had money, and my marriage was not the same, I don't see the essence because I was practically living with a robot who only spoke to me at intervals. So just 2 weeks ago, I got a call from Flora's neighbor. Her name is Andrea, and I am quite cordial with her. Whenever I visit, I say hi to her, and I even used to share food with her whenever I brought some food for Flora. She called me over to a place and told me she had something very important to say to me. She made it clear that she did not want me to tell Flora about it and that I was only allowed to come when Flora was at work. I found that very weird and confusing, but I got really curious and decided to go and see what she had to say. I was aware of Flora's work schedule, so I was able to make it there when Flora was still at work. I even had work that day, but I had to switch my shift with a friend of mine at work. My curiosity made me do a night shift that day, but I was not even able to do the night shift after I found out what Flora and Nathaniel had been up to. Andrea told me that Flora had been receiving a particular guest constantly for weeks. I was very surprised, but I did not really know how that had anything to do with me. At first, I didn't get why she called me over just to tell me that Flora had been having a particular guest coming over for weeks. But Andrea shocked me by telling me that the guest Flora had been having over constantly was my husband. I couldn't even believe my ears, and I found it hard to understand what she was saying for a very long time. To say I was shocked would be an honest understatement. I even got angry with Andrea and got up from where I sat. I told her it was disrespectful for her to just speak about my husband like that. I was very angry with her and I even tried to work out. But Andrea did not change her words. She told me she was completely serious, and when I asked her for proof, she just told me that she had seen my husband with my children, and that was how she knew that the guy was my husband. I know that I have never introduced my husband to Andrea because I never invited him over to Flora's house. She told me that she has been seeing the guy constantly but did not know who he was. Andrea saw my husband on the road with my 2 kids, and that was how she knew that it was my husband who had been frequenting Flora's house. It finally made sense, and I believed her because I had introduced my children to her many times before whenever I brought them to Flora's place. I was so angry that I ran out of her house and did not even wait for her to finish speaking. I went to the house and met my husband there. I grabbed his shirt and asked him if he had been visiting Flora all these while without my knowledge. Nathaniel did not even try to deny everything I had said. He said it was true, and that I was the one to blame. The man who cheated on me was accusing me of being the one to blame. Nathaniel told me that he made a mistake by marrying me because I was the type of moment to back about feeding her family. I asked him where all those thoughts were coming from, and that was how he told me that he found out. I have been talking about him to too many people. That's when I realized that Flora had snitched on me and told my husband everything I said. But without being honest, I was very angry and I was about to scream in my lungs, but I had to calm down because our children were in their house. Nathaniel was very indifferent, and even when I tried to explain to him that Flora lied to him, he told me he preferred a woman who stood by him when he was broke and helped him look for a job at another company than a woman like me who only brought his flaws. The man that I am taking over the responsibility of the house from said that to me. Nathaniel left the house before I could even sweat a word, and he has not come back home for the past 2 weeks. She only came to see the children, eat, and grab a change of clothes. I had gone to Flora's place to confront her, and she locked me out of the house. Every single day for the past 2 weeks, I have tried to go to her workplace and confront her, but she has avoided me successfully. I got another shock yesterday when Nathaniel came over and gave me the divorce papers. I feel like a fool, and at the same time I feel like the villain and the victim. I should have never spoken to my best friend and talked trash about my husband. But I don't think it's fair that this is how Nathaniel chooses to pay me after months of having his back. I'm already dressed to go to my parents' place and tell them everything that has been happening in person. I spoke to them over the phone, and they were very devastated, so they asked me to come over so they could speak to me. I'll make an update to this post and tell you all how everything went. Update. Thank you for reading my story and dropping your comments. I'll just try my best to get straight to the point now because this is a very delicate subject for me, and I feel vulnerable writing about it. It's been 6 months now, and I recently got divorced from Nathaniel. After speaking to my parents, they were very angry and they gave me hours of lectures. They told me that I had just had the fire myself by keeping everything from them and trusting a Flora instead of them. They spoke to one of my brothers, and he was the one that helped me catch Flora. I asked him to help me follow her secretly and tell me exactly where she was. That was how I was able to see her and have a conversation with her. I won't even lie to you guys. It was not a conversation at all. It was a confrontation, and it led to me almost making her bald. I didn't give her a chance to speak before I pounced on her and started scratching her with my nails. I injured her so much that my brother had to intervene and drag me away from her. I called her a betrayer and cursed her. She just laughed in my face and called me a fool. She told me that since I had a problem with my husband, she decided to have him for herself. I discovered that Flora had gone behind my back to tell lies to my husband, then help him get a job. My husband saw this as a big deal, so he left me. She was saying so many hurtful things that my brother had to drag me away from there. He told me that there was no need for me to listen to her for my own mental health and that I had hurt her enough. The betrayal stung a lot, and I don't think I'll ever be able to trust anybody anymore. Before I signed the divorce paper Nathaniel sent to me, I asked him the real reason he started to fight with his boss. He told me that his boss had been secretly cutting off a salary for months and that when you found out, he just got very angry and could not control himself. I cannot believe that Nathaniel preferred his ego to having a proper conversation with his boss. You could have just confronted his boss and requested a refund, but he decided to pick a fight and lose his job. I don't care what anyone says, but even though I am at fault, and 90% of the issues were as a result of my impatience and gullible nature, I still stood by Nathaniel in his toughest moment. I just got tired like everyone else, and it took a toll on me. Anyone else in my position would have done the same thing. I got tired of shouldering the responsibilities, and that's normal. I should have never taken my marital problems to my best friend and talked trash about my husband. I also should have never rubbed his incapability in his face. For all those things, I take full responsibility. But everything else that happened was just pure betrayal and deceit. Nathaniel and I got joint custody of the kids, and he's the one in charge of paying for the apartment we currently live in. He's also the one paying for the children's school fees and health care. Nathaniel and Flora are now in a relationship, and they are living together. Well, I am divorced now, and I hope that Flora and Nathaniel will have a very bad life. I do not care for any of them anymore. That's the awful thing that happened to me as a result of blindly trusting people. I hope someone out there learns from my mistake and doesn't make the same bad mistakes I made.